Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be talking about this grapple move. So generally, as I say in many other videos, when two people come at each other with a decent amount of momentum, something like this is almost bound to happen. Basically where all of their hands, all of the wrists are all up here in a sort of worthless striking position where they're too close to throw any real cut or thrust. But what you are able to do is disconnect your offhand and try to attack your opponent's lead hand or dominant hand that has the sword in it. Most of the time, people go up through the middle in between the hands and then try to kind of wax off to pull their dominant hand up under their hip or under their armpit. But in this case, Arto is going outside and over, and there's a very good reason to do this. I've talked about a move that utilizes this before, but Arto takes it to another little step, and that is using his opponent's forward momentum of falling forward to get him into a bit of a shoulder lock, completely isolating this hand and his opposite hand so that absolutely nothing can be done to defend himself, and just kind of waiting until he can present the thrust meaningfully here. So if we go back and we watch it one more time, there are a couple options here that make this successful where sometimes it is not. And generally, when you're reaching up to try to pull someone's hands down, one of the difficulties is that you often have to pull into your own chest. And what you end up doing is just sort of pinning their hand to your trap muscle, just basically putting it in the crook between your shoulder and your neck. And that's not a good place to place your opponent's sword. It does keep them from hitting you, but it doesn't necessarily keep them from doing anything else, and you end up more in a standing clinch position. So what's very important is that as you're doing this move like Arto, you have to make sure that you don't actually put a whole lot of pressure down. You can see here that there's not really a lot of downward pressure until Arto gets to about here, where his elbow is already on top of his opponent's shoulder. So you don't want to pull until you get to this position, because then what you're going to do is you're going to pull and wind out and around. If you don't get this kind of rotation from rotating your arm all the way over their shoulder and then pulling off to your right side, you're not going to get this result where you get them to kind of stumble forward or, end up in this shoulder lock position. Also, another thing to make sure of is that many people won't simply let you pull them forward. And if this particular opponent had maybe their feet under them a little bit better or were a little bit stronger or just more aware of what was going to be happening to them, what they probably could have done is taken their left foot and put it right about here to try to stay square with Arto. At which point, what you really have to make sure of is that this rotation of your hips is what's going to turn your opponent into this position to finish that shoulder lock. And if you don't get them basically facing the entirely wrong direction from you, or you don't get to a position where you could take their back, you're not going to be able to present your sword in such a way that you'll be able to land a follow-up. So one thing that we could learn from wrestling here is that throwing this move, again, works really, really well. But there are a couple of points of failure where your opponent can do intelligent things in order to try to stay facing your direction. But one thing that we know is that in wrestling, this is a move that helps you take your opponent's back even before they get to a position like this. So if you're in this situation here where you're starting to lever over your opponent's arm and you feel them start to try to square up with you, focus instead on taking your left foot in a situation like this, putting it behind their feet, sort of abandoning the fact that you're going to be able to strike them meaningfully with your sword. Let go with your left arm here and then pull it around to their back. Again, this is something that you'll see in wrestling or BJJ all the time, because getting the back is an extremely dominant position where you can isolate both arms. And normally, certain BJJ and judo moves don't really work because we have a weapon in our right hands or dominant hands. In this particular case, taking the back from this angle won't be very much of a problem because the longsword is so long that there's no way to meaningfully turn it around and hit you if you're completely behind somebody. So as a kind of three-part move here, if you parry a good, forward momentum exchange and you let go with your left hand and you're really going for a grapple here, the three things you got to look for are: one, how high can you get your arm over their shoulder? If you can't get it very far, you're going to have to do something slightly different. But if you can get it high enough, this is what you're going to want to do. And if they continue to fall forward and not stay with you, you're going to put them in this shoulder lock and basically just level your point at the back of their head. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send an email over at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.